Hi there, happy holidays, and welcome to a special episode of Planet Zoo. Today, I'm going to show you around the secret-ish project that myself and Mrs. T-Rex have been working on for around a month. We've made a Miniature Festive Village Zoo. Now, this has been a lot of work, and if I was to hazard a guess, the Arctic Zoo I did earlier in the year, now that tallied up to around 125 hours, and this one took a little bit more effort than that one did, believe it or not. So there's at least 125 hours on my part anyway that's gone into this zoo. So you might be wondering, how does something like this come about? Well, back in October, I knew I wanted to do something festive with Planet Zoo this year. And when I go big on an idea like this, I do tend to go all out. So I asked Mrs. T-Rex if she wanted to collaborate, because something like this, with only a month to build it, it was just too much to take on alone. Now, if you've never watched Mrs. T-Rex, she builds like I do, so very much out of the box thinking, which is why this zoo gels so well together. So if you haven't watched this stuff, go check out her channel. I'll leave a link in the description below. So I had this concept of making a miniature zoo, like one of those Christmassy displays where some people do just have like a little village display on their window or something. And then you do get some crazy people that really go all out and they'll fill an entire room like this one. So I guess the idea struck me to do an entire room and a little miniature zoo. I've seen people do stuff like this in City Skylines and Transport Fever, and there's also quite a few miniature theme parks people have made in Planet Coaster, so I thought why not do the same for Planet Zoo. I wanted to see if it was possible, and I've got to say I'm happy with the result. So to build this, I started off with the terraforming. When you build a floating landscape, it's better to start off with that first and then build the stuff around it. It was really fun building a giant room. I mean, the Christmas tree was a little more challenging. It's basically just a lot of art shapes and lights. Essentially, to make this, I just had to think back to the many fake Christmas trees that I've put together in my life. They're all essentially made of the same components, so I mimicked that as best as I could in the game with the art shapes, and I think the result is actually really nice. I dotted some other furniture and decorations about, just giving the room a bit of character, so it ties in really well with the overall concept. Right, anyway, let's take a look at the zoo itself. Before I did any of the buildings or decorating, I figured out the general layout of the animal habitats to make sure that they'd all fit in and were laid out in a logical order. That's when I had a little bit of a problem. You see, the polar bears here are bloody greedy so-and-sos. I had to extend the table out to accommodate how much blooming room they need. I did figure it out in the end, but it's a little annoying how much actual room those polar bears need. It's like double what any other animal requires. So I mean, I think it does still look a little odd in comparison to where everything else is on the table, but you can't have a festive zoo without them, so the polar bears are still in. Since I'm talking about the polar bears, we should take a look at their enclosure. The concept I've gone for here, it's like a frozen mountain that reaches down into the frozen lake here, and the gondola ride follows the winding path around the mountain. Riders get a great view of the polar bears from here when they're out and about. For the ride entrance, I went with a kind of frozen tower theme here, which, if I'm honest, I'm not entirely happy with all of this. If I'd had more time, I'd probably have reworked this again, but honestly, even with a month, time has been really tight on this build, so what's there is there, and it's fine. I'm happy with it. The mountain path itself, this is also made of frozen rocks, and then I've terraformed around that to make it look like the little stream of water that's frozen over. Now, I think that looks a lot better than the tower itself, so I think that works quite well. Over to the entrance here, the bears have their own little cave here, and around the other side, I've got the overlook here to give guests a good view. This whole area of the park, we've gone with more traditional sort of looking Nordic Viking style buildings, and that's using the Arctic DLC architecture pieces here. Inside here, you've got the viewing area below, and then upstairs is an open gallery too, so there's plenty of great views for guests. This all ties in with the circle of shops we have here, and over on the other side I made this little Viking cabin, which I think looks pretty cute up here in the hills. So, sightline. Now, I laid everything out in the zoo so that when you're down on the lowest level here, you get a decent view of everything up top. So when you walk around the path, you can see what's coming from the upper levels. Then when you get to the steps here, I wanted the Grand Train Station to be the focal point. Down on the lowest level here, we've got the reindeer. And there's the wonderful bandstand next to this that Mrs. T-Rex pulled together for us. And then the outer edges of the lowest level, we've got the secondary train station and lots more of these little Christmassy shops and homes. Fun fact about all the buildings, the way we've set this zoo up means that we weren't able to make use of the snow biome or the snow weather effects, so all of this is basically fake snow. When I made the stuff in the Arctic biome, literally every building gets covered in snow, so like everything gets covered, even all the walls and flooring and the decorations of the room were covered in snow, so that wouldn't do at all, it just didn't work for the concept. Then I tried building in a temperate biome but turned on the snow weather effect, and well, you turn on the snow effect and everything just gets bathed in fog and rain and snow, and you can't see a thing, so it's no good for the concept we were going for. So fake snow was the only way to go. I mean, it worked out okay, but it did take a while to add it everywhere. If you're wondering why there's no real snow, that's why. We did manage to get real snow on the ground at least, because we just added those little coolers everywhere, so that worked out at least. Anyway, let's move on and take a look at some of the exhibits. Here we have the Himalayan brown bears, and they're generally pretty happy in their little secluded enclosure here. Guests have a top-down view from 2 levels. The little windy path here at the back is just for staff to the exhibit door. Up above this, we have the Siberian Tigers, again with a nice top-down viewing point along this path here. Above the tigers is our Arctic wolf enclosure. Now, this is yet another amazing Mrs. T-Rex creation, and one of the delightful surprises in here is the little cozy shelter. I mean, decked out with all the little fireplace and Christmas tree and whatnot. It's all very neat, and it's an adorable concept that I love. Up above the tigers, I've added this Japanese macaque closed-in enclosure. Now, originally I wanted this to have some outdoor space on the roof bit, as well as the inside the walls here. Wait a minute, what are they up to? Okay, that's really weird. I've had a few issues touring the zoo since the new DLC landed, and I guess this is another one of those weird situations. I guess we'll leave them to it. Now, the neat thing about this enclosure is it feeds directly into the snow leopard enclosure behind it. What I wanted here was to have the wooden structure snake around to the back here, so where you can still view the macaques from the windows back here, or if you look around this way, you get an overlook of the snow leopards at the back here, so dual purpose I guess. Our final animal setup back here is the dall sheep. Now, for these guys, I've given them a bit of a castle back here for their hard shelter. I mean, considering this is the highest peak of the mountain back here, it feels kind of right to have a drywall type castle structure too. So quite a fancy shelter for them up here. Moving on. Up the back here is the Grand train station, and like I said before, I went pretty fancy on this since this is going to be the focal point for the whole zoo. This design, I've based it on St Pancras station in London, so a traditional red brick train station. I did play around with the level of the train tracks around the zoo too, so you've got little raised bit back here, and that cuts through the mountain back here before you go back down to ground level. So it gives it a little bit of a variance in level for the train tracks. Around this top level, I've also got in the fancy decorated townhouse and the Ferris wheel here, which probably is a bit noisy for the people living in the house, but you know, it's just decoration at the end of the day, isn't it? To be honest, all this stuff looks better with the lights off, so I'll show you around with the lights off before we finish up. Here we go, lights are off. Now normally I'm quite forgetful when it comes to lighting, and a lot of my stuff, you know, it's great in the day, and then when it gets dark it's like, oops, I forgot all the lighting. But I spend an extra effort on this zoo because the lighting is so crucial for the festive theme, and I absolutely love the way it came out. Things like the Christmas tree and the room decorations, especially those little socks on the fireplace, the lighting there just makes it perfect. I love the idea of putting fairy lights on the windows at the back as well. The way it's a bit glowy, it really looks like it's on the outside of the window, when in fact if you go over there, it's just normal lights that are attached to the wall, but from a distance it looks really good. Inside the zoo, you'll notice over by the Arctic Plunge bit, I went with more cold blue, violet-y colours, and that's to fit in with the ice we've got back here. Gives it more of that feeling of being frozen. So there's a lot of lights are just buried into the ground here to give it that ambience. This mid-tier section here, I've got some of the more narrower buildings here. I figured you couldn't have a festive village without an old church, and I'm really pleased with how the little church came out. This section over here is really popping in the colours because this is kind of the make-believe section. So I've got the gingerbread house here with the little gingerbread man, and he's really popping with colours because I had to use the colourable balls for his eyes and his facial features and stuff, and because they all glow, if you add glow on top of glow, you get this massive mega glow. So he does pop a little bit too much maybe in colour. I've got a similar thing going on over here with Santa's workshop. So because it's more make-believe, there's a lot of very poppy colours on the signposts and on the candy canes and stuff. And of course, we've got the reindeer here and the sleigh. Santa's workshop itself. Now, inside here, I've got a large staff room, and you could basically put whatever you wanted in here, but I like to keep the staff rooms out the way. So I thought, oh, that's a great idea. Just make, because it's something that you maybe would have in a real zoo where you've got Santa's workshop, but it's really a staff building dressed up as the workshop. The other nice thing with the lighting here is that I kept this sight line so that it was all lit up right up the stairs, right up to the train station, which it just explodes in colour. I mean, I probably did go a bit overboard with the decorations, but it fits in well. I think we got the balance right with the lighting here. I mean, up around the back where most of the animals are, now that's not decorated quite so brightly because obviously you wouldn't have that because it would bother the animals when they're trying to sleep. So up around the back, it's a little bit more subtle, which I think fits in well. The rest of it, just crazy, colours everywhere, and I love it. So that, ladies and gents, is the Miniature Festive Village. It's been an amazing little build to do, especially thanks to the help that I've had from Mrs. T-Rex on the enclosures and buildings. I couldn't have got this finished without her. So just a huge thank you there for the collaboration effort on that. In case you're wondering, the whole zoo is up on the workshop, so feel free to download the link in the description below and check this out for yourself. I've also added the individual Christmassy bits and bobs that I've created for this zoo onto the workshop too, so feel free to use them in your own builds. My only stipulation for the zoo, as you can possibly well imagine, is that the piece count in this zoo is probably insane. I mean, the walls and floor alone are all individual art shapes. So yeah, if you try and load this onto like a laptop or an older PC, you might get a little bit of lag and crashes, just to forewarn. Anyway, that's it from me today. I'm sure I'll be back with more videos later this week covering the new aquatic DLC, which has just landed today, and I have been checking that out and I'm already in love with a lot of the animals they've got in there. But that's me and the Festive Zoo done for this year. So I hope you've enjoyed this and wish you all a very Merry Christmas. Let me know what you think of it in the comments and leave a like if you did enjoy it. Honestly, it gives me a big boost to what I'm doing here when I spend ridiculous hours on a big concept zoo like this. When people tell me how much they enjoy them, it does make it all worth it. So anyway, I'll leave you be with a suitably festive outro. So thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.